Yo. Everyone, and welcome to Anime Fanfic for you, back with another part of What If Issei was betrayed by everybody and was the son of the legendary Dark Knight Sparta. But before we start, please consider subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Now, let's start to part 3. Mission 3: Traveling with a Vampire and the Last Battle. Nero and Yu had arrived without problems at the base that he had made at that level. Nero needed to prepare his equipment for the next level, and instead of returning to his base, they could have used the sealed room, but when Nero proposed it to her, Yu categorically refused. Although, it was not a surprise, since she was sealed there for so long. They would not be able to move anywhere until they replenished their supplies. And it was better for her mental health that they escape, in addition to remembering that he had left his things in his shelter. At this moment, they were chatting while he prepared his equipment. Nero. So how old are you? I've met vampires before and I know they can live around 300 years or more. Yu. After hearing Nero's words, she got annoying. How rude to say such a thing to a lady. Yu looked at Nero with reproach for his lack of delicacy. Nero mind. I've been so relaxed and laid back that my attitude began to change a lot, and I had already forgotten that women hate being mentioned their age. Remembering his time with Elmenold, who taught him more about the vampire and their history, and about a league where they almost became extinct in a massive war 300 years ago. Nero mind. You may not know her true age, after all she was sealed in that dark room for a long time. It's not uncommon if she doesn't know how long it's been since it was sealed. Yu was sealed when she was 20 years old, which would make her true age more than 300. Nero. Do all vampires live long? He began to wonder since Elmenhide didn't explain well enough. Yu. Some do, but I'm special. Automatic regeneration prevents my aging. When she was 12 years old, her magic manipulation and automatic regeneration woke up and stopped her aging. Since common vampires consumed blood, they lived longer than other races. Even so, 300 years was their limit. Humans lived on average to 70 years, while monsters lived for a long time. For the semi-humans, life expectancy generally depended on the tribe. An elf could live for several hundred years. Yu was considered one of the strongest in just a few years after her awakened her ancestral powers. At the age of 17 she was fit for the throne. The magic that had melted the scorpion's shell was launched in an instant. She also had an immortal body. To the point that it would be called god or monster. Yu told him that it was the second. Yu's uncle, blinded by his greed for power, spread rumors which caused others to see her as a monster. They tried to kill her, but her automatic regeneration did not allow her to die. At that moment they chose to seal her instead. She was shocked by the sudden betrayal. Very confused, she didn't resist while they put stamps on her. By the time she realized, it was sealed in the room, not knowing what methods they used to contain it. For that reason, she didn't know much about the seal, the scorpion, or even that they were in the abyss. Nero was a little disappointed to know that she didn't know how many levels are there to get out of the abyss. Nero. I see, that's why I was in that kind of place. Your automatic regeneration heals you from every wound. I still believe that although you surpass mine, but who knows if my regeneration can beat yours. One question, if you were injured during the battle against the scorpion, would you have been healed? Yu. I didn't have the magical power to regenerate at that moment. If I had it, I could regenerate repeatedly unless it is completely destroyed. But then she was surprised by him having a regeneration. You have a regeneration ability as well. Nero. Something like that. Certain I can heal from being pierced or cut, but it's not like your. Yu. Nero. Nero. Yu. Why are you here? She was curious why a person like him is fight in this terrifying place, where only the monsters lived. Also about why he could manipulate the magic directly, about what had happened to his right arm to look like a demon arm, and why some parts of his body were different from the rest. Nero. My story is long and boring, do you still want to listen to it? Yu. Nero. I see, so to begin with, your story is very similar to mine. Yu. What do you mean by similar, Nero? Nero. Time has changed the world, has humans with sacred gear blessed by God. There are different types of races. Such as demons, angels, yaokeis, magical beasts, vampires, gods and dragons. Of course, most humans don't know that they exist. Nero hoped that you would be impressed to hear that there were still vampires around the world, but. Yu. She was surprised by something else, so dragons still exist in world. Nero. He was surprised that she cared more about dragons than her own race, eh? Why yeah. Nero had been surprised by Yu's rapid change of attitude when she heard that dragons still exist in world, which reminded him that dragons were considered extinct with their low number back then. Nero. It could be that you like dragons. Yu. She smiles slightly and nods. They are very intelligent and honorable beings that must be respected. Nero. I see. Nero mind. Those bastards would have been happy to hear those words, but But this thought, as Nero was going continued with his story, you ask him something. You. So how do you know about the supernatural, Nero? It could be that aren't you human either? Nero. I didn't know about the existence of these other races. I discovered it when I was murdered. You. She was surprised I'm murdered, but you are alive. How is it possible that you had been murdered? Nero. That's where my story begins, you. What happened? Little by little, Nero was telling you about what had happened. How he was killed by his first girlfriend, how he was turned into a demon and what happened after being turned into a demon. It was the first conversation he had had in a long time, so somehow he felt happy. Talking to you made him feel less lonely. Besides, he never imagined that he would tell his story to someone outside of people who knew him. Nero talked about how he discovered that his sacred gear was a powerful weapon that could kill gods, and that he had the soul of a very powerful dragon sealed in it. Also about his battle to break the marriage commitment of his mistress, the battle against the fallen angel Cacabeal, how he fought against his destined rival, his battle against the god Loki, and so on. He told him all the battles he had overcome, so as not to embarrass his mistress and thus be able to be his pride. Finally, I told her about the battle against Trahixa. Then he proceeded to tell her how he discovered that he was used by the faction and was betrayed by them and the girls he loved, the pain he suffered when he saw them kissed his supposed replace Ash, and how they made him the new hero of the faction and was betrayed by his partner Drake known as Delia and was turned back into a human by Scarlet Office. How he was saved from his depression by Saphira and now is training to become strong and recover fully to surpass his past self. And receiving help from allies and friends who believed in him and supported him, and how he came here to train and would go to save the man he considered a brother. But when he was about to finish, he could hear you sobbing with the angry towards the race she respected. Nero looked at her and could see how she was crying. Nero. What's wrong? You. She had tears in her eyes and crying, it's so sad you suffer like me. For a few seconds, Nero stared at her surprised, he didn't expect her to cry for him. When he saw her cry, he approached her and wiped the tears and then stroked her head and made a smile. Nero. Don't worry, all that is already part of the past. If I looked back, I wouldn't be able to move forward. Now my goal is to finish this labyrinth and get back to my loved ones. You. I see, but what about those traitor? Will you be looking for revenge? Nero. No, if my goal was to get revenge, then all I have to do is nothing. They'll receive their punishment when they realize who their hero really is. He then told you who that person really is and gave her a smile, and in return, she smiled back evilly as Nero talked more. Instead, I want to put all my effort into getting stronger. What I will do after leaving this place and return home. You. I see. You looked down while she had a sad expression on her pretty face. You. I don't have a place to go back to anymore. Nero. So you no longer have a place to belong to, do you? You. Nero. He shows smiles, then come with me. Those words made you open her eyes very surprised and stay there without saying anything, and when she was finally able to say something, all you said was, you? Huh? Nero. If you no longer have a place to go back to, you can stay with me. Together we will leave this place and go to my home. Although it will be a bit complicated, some things like the family registry and that, but I'm sure we can fix it. However, if you doesn't want to, I can't force her. You was surprised for a moment, but eventually her mind recovered and she spoke timidly. You? Yes. Their eyes could not hide hope by inhabiting them. They were shining. You nodded. As if her expressionless face until a moment ago was a lie, a smile bloomed on her face. Nero was hypnotized. When he realized it, he panicked and shook his head. He had realized that since they had left the temple he was unable to stare at her for a long time. Because of this he focused on continuing to transmute the idea that had occurred to him. You had been interested in the transmutation and began to approach him to watch him work. At that moment you realized that there was still a doubt that Nero had not clarified when telling his story. You. Nero, why are there parts of your body that are different? Nero. About that it would be a lie if I told you that I know. The truth is that I have no idea what is happening to me. Having a devil arm with me feels weird, I'm not going to lie, I like the power, but it feels weird and I can feel like I'm getting stronger. You. I see, does it bother you? Nero. Well, to be honest, no. I feel comfortable, and you, does my appearance bother you? You. No, not at all. Nero is Nero, no matter what you looks like. Nero. He showed a smile as well, for now we should eat. Nero got up, took some of the meat of the Cyclops and the Scorpion, and then put it in a container and cook it with lighting fleet. Once Nero finished, he put the meat in another container and returned to the place where he was sitting with you. Nero. It's true, now that I think about it, will you be okay with eating this meat? Are vampires okay with it? Since the day he decided to do anything to survive, he had been eating the flesh of monsters every day. Because of this, Nero just remembered that ordinary people could not eat them, otherwise they would die. So he wondered if the you, who fed on blood, would be okay to eat it. You. She shook her head, I don't need food. Nero? Seriously? You have been locked up here in the abyss for a long time. If I were you, I would now be able to eat whatever I find. Are you sure you don't want to eat? You. I'm sorry but I already ate. Nero? Seriously? What did you eat? He watched her belly as he wondered when she had eaten and what she ate. Seeing Nero's confusion, she pointed it down while licking her lips. You. Nero, you were very tasty. Upon hearing what she said and seeing her lick her lips, Nero felt chills again and unconsciously began to move away slowly. Nero? Wait, what do you mean by that? You. A nice flavor. Nero? What are you talking about? You. Your blood tastes like a vegetable and meat soup that was cooked slowly. Just as Nero had begun to move away, she began to get closer and closer to him. Nero? Why it should have a very horrible taste because of all the monster meat I've eaten. It's impossible for it to have a delicious taste. When she said that word, she just remembered that when she gave her blood the first time, she had also said it. It was most likely that for that reason he felt that you drank his blood happily. Well, I was thinking about those things, under guard, and you didn't miss that opportunity. With a quick movement she threw herself on top of him. He wanted to free himself, but surprisingly, she immobilized him and didn't let him escape. You. An intense and dense flavor. Nero? Wah. Sekvira. You. She licks her lips. Time to eat. Dear grandfather, you are in heaven. I had decided to do anything to survive, so I completely immersed myself in the darkness. I thought there would be no turning back on this. However, someone showed up to get me out of there. She has beautiful red eyes and beautiful blonde hair. It would be a lie if I told you that I was not captivated when I saw her. You know, Grandpa. Even though she seems addicted to drinking my blood, I'm happy to have her by my side. Now I'm just wondering what the future will bring for me with this beautiful girl. Nero cabin. We currently see 3 individuals who are having tea and snacks while speaking about a certain boy named Nero about the term of the harem and are waiting for another girl who would come soon. But all of a sudden they felt like something was about to taken from them. She had a smile that doesn't show any anger, but her aura was another thing. For some reason you can see a figure from that aura seem like a demon wear a mask with a lance ready to strike as she let out some fufu. Lyda was calm, but when she opened her eyes that show anger as she turned to the direction of where Nero is in the labyrinth. Sekvira was trembling in anger and could only wait for Nero to come back and serve a punishment to our protagonist and many others that would break a man. Author. Oh no, I'm scared. The forest. We see the last girl arriving where her beloved Nero is currently living and where his lover is. Who also wants to discuss with her about Nero, but she felt like the other 3. Kurumi had the aura like Ria, but it was bigger and scarier that it made the bird fly for their lives as they heard her voice make a cuckoo and the eyes crazy like a beast. Author. Please someone save Nero. The labyrinth. A few minutes later. A few minutes later you had finished eating her delicious new favorite food and Nero, when he managed to get rid of the enzyme girl, he began to eat the flesh of the monsters, and when he finished he began to create the parts for his new weapon under Yu's gaze. Which Nero noticed but did not bother him. In fact, he liked that she enjoyed what he was doing, so he continued under the attentive gaze of the girl. You. Nero, she said, calling his attention. Your gun has a name, she asked curiously looking at Nero's guns. Nero. My weapon. There, his name is Donner and Schlag. He said as he lifted his guns full of pride. You. I like it, she said with a smile, which makes Nero happy. Nero. Do you really like it? He said, looking at the girl. You. If I like it too, you chose my name, so any name you choose is good. Nero. Thank you. Well, soon we will start moving, so rest for a while, he said, starting to put all his things, and Rebellion and Muramasa put him back into the Devilbringer. Nero put everything he needed in his backpack by placing the grenades and bullets in strategic places of this. Once the rest was over and both began their way, although Yu took from his blood whenever she could. A few days later. Nero. Some traitors, were they the ones who built the dungeons? He said a little surprised. Yu. Gave as an affirmation. Nero. And what else do you know about them? I asked, wanting to know more about these people. Yu. Nero, she said as she looked at him, very confused. Nero. Yes, what's up, Yu? He said, wanting to know what he wanted. Yu. Do you think this is the right time to talk about this? She said, very confused. Nero. If you mean the situation we are in, then yes, no problem. If you're wondered why Nero was running while carrying Yu and a certain strange type of monsters was chasing them. Monsters? Gruoer. They roared while chasing, the two of them being around 200 monsters. A few moments before the two began their descent, being that in all this time they had gone down 10 levels, in which they formed a good team together, since Yu was in charge of the magic and Nero was a bit of everything, being that either he ended up with the enemies with Donner or Rebellion or Fire Dragon shot a shot of fire in the shape of ball. Only in a few cases, thanks to their great combination, they ended up with any monster that crossed their path. That way they had reached the current level that seemed to be very extensive, looking like a petrified forest. When they arrived, it seemed a quiet place until the floor of the place began to tremble, noticing as a monster that Nero recognized as a Tyrannosaurus Rex, although this one had a beautiful flower on his head. This one really seemed threatening or intimidating, but the beautiful flower in his head took away all the seriousness and intimidating aura. But it seemed that the Tyrannosaurus, I didn't think the same, since when I noticed the presence of the two boys running towards them to attack them, but when they saw this, they shared a look knowing what they should do. Nearer you. Fire Dragon shot Scarlet Spear, they both said, launching their attacks, being that Yu's attack was a fire spear that pierced the dinosaur's mouth, and the Fire Dragon energy ball destroyed the lower part of it. Nero. I think that was exaggerated for a single monster. He said, thinking that it was not necessary. Yu. I don't think so. She said, as if it were nothing. Nero. You're right, he said, just letting himself go. Good job, Yu, he said while caressing the head of the girl, who was very happy because of the affection of the boy who was beginning to be very frequent. At that moment, Nero used perception and detected 10 monsters near, so Nero and Yu hid their presences to see the behavior of the dinosaurs, noticing that they seemed to hunt together almost like those wolves that threw lightning, although they were surprised by their behavior, being that their new enemies looked like a kind of raptor, but the flowers they had were tulips. Nero. Yu waits, I want to do something, he said while looking at his partner, who nodded, and when he looked at his victim, he had been left alone, being that the other 9 raptors had retired. Well, let's see what happens. He said, taking out Donner and pointing at the flower on the animal's head, and when he shot, I noticed how the animal had remained motionless for a second until it began to twist and then fell to the ground. Yu. Did it die? She said, very confused. Nero. I don't think I can feel that one is alive. What is having a flower just a decoration? Yu. But they look cute. She said, and Nero looked at her a little confused by the girl's tastes. While they talked and looked at the kidnapper's body, he began to get up as if he had been disoriented, but despite the fact that Nero and Yu had shown their presence, he concentrated more on the flower that was on the ground, starting to step on it, which surprised the two. Nero. And now he's getting angry with that flower? He said, very confused. Yu. So he hates that flower, she said, a little sad since he thought it was very pretty. Nero. Is it that someone put it on without permission to make fun of him? The mini dinosaur continued to tread the tulip until he felt satisfied, being that he smiled, being noticed by the two of them, and when he is about to leave, he saw in front of him Nero and Yu, who looked at him without any particular emotion. Nero. It seems that he didn't really know that they had put that flower on him, he said, noticing that he had barely noticed their presence. Yu. So it was bothering him. Both saw with sorrow the rotten dinosaur in front of them. On the other hand, the dinosaur did not understand what was happening until his mind clicked, exposing his fangs to his praise, jumping quickly where they were, but he never arrived since Nero put a bullet in his eyebrows, being that the end of the poor dinosaur who had recovered his freedom to immediately lose him. Nero. It seems that there is bullying between monsters. Yu. They intimidated and bothered him, poor thing. Nero. Well, now that won't happen to him anymore, he said, looking at the monster's corpse. Nero felt the presence of monsters approaching them. They began to move to an advantageous position, but… Nero. Seriously. Why does everyone have flowers on their head? Who is putting those flowers on them? He said, since they all had a flower on their head. Yu. They are still cute, she said, until they noticed how another group arrived where they were raptor, and Nero still wondered why a flower. Nero. Let's finish this. He said, pointing at the dinosaurs. Yu. If Nero wants to, I'll finish with them, she said, to feel how Nero carried her, and Nero used air dance to be higher than him and use aerodynamic to make a plate form, while Yu cast a spell ice prison, freezing everyone in the place. Nero. Well done, I didn't expect anything less from the vampire princess. He said, and Yu swelled her chest with pride. Yu, but I can't throw another one like it. She said as Nero went down to the floor to uncover his neck and she regained strength. At that moment Nero noticed something with his perception. There were more than 100 monsters approaching them. Nero. Yu, we have enemies approaching us. He said, and she stopped taking blood. Yu, I wanted more, she said, pouting. Nero. You'll drink later, something very strange is happening here and it surely has to do with those flowers. Yu, it may be some kind of parasite. She said, and Nero understood it instantly. Nero. You're right, Yu, so we must take care of who is controlling them. Yu. The main body. she said, and Nero nodded. Nero. Although at the moment we are a little surrounded, he said, looking at all the dinosaurs with flowers that were surrounding them, if we don't take care of the controller we will be against this whole floor. You know, now that I think about it, I know how to find it. The closer we are to the one who controls them, these will be more anxious to protect that place. Tell me, can you run? He asked, and she denied. You, Nero, carry me, she said, stretching her arms so that he would receive her. Nero. You want me to do that to drink my blood, right? He said, and she just nodded. I'm glad you told me beforehand. Let's go, he said, receiving the girl who began to take from his blood and was carried by Nero, who moved away from the group of dinosaurs who was chasing him energetically, although he was surprised to feel more presences approaching, being that they joined the chase group, and that's how they ended up in that situation where they both fled from at least 200 monsters. You. Kapu, Chu, it was heard that you continued to take Nero's blood to recharge energy, since she threw magic to kill the dinosaurs that were trying to get very close to them. The two continued their journey so much so that they left the petrified forest of the place, being that the monsters really began to become more violent, meaning that they were close to the controller, so Nero began to use flash step and air dance to reach their goal faster, being that the dinosaurs were quickly left behind. You. Kapu, Chu, she claimed Nero's neck again, and he was a little upset for now feeling his personal blood bank. Nero. You. He angry scream, can you stop sucking my blood? You. I need it, she said as he looked away. Nero. Liar. I know you've barely used magic since the last time you took a sip, he said as he looked at her reproachfully. You. Ah, the flowers are draining my strength, I faint, she said as she became weakened. Nero. Leave that, I know you are well, I can feel your strength, you remember, he said, and she could only make a pout, even with the tense situation in which they were both. You just wanted to take Nero's blood, even when they had stopped being chased, even entering a crack where perception detected a sign of life. Considering the monster that was controlling the others, well, now they will not be able to reach us, he said as he entered from the crack that was enough for a human, but the dinosaurs could not. You. Good job, she said, even in Nero's arm. Nero. You know, I think you can let go of me now, he said since she was holding him by his neck. You. I don't want to, she said, not wanting to leave it. Nero. You know, the thing that controls them is here, I must be mobile, he said calmly, hoping that would convince her. You, Moo, there is no other choice, she said as she descends without much desire on top of him, but when she got off they began his walk, and only a few moments later they reached what seemed like a bedroom where a countless number of balls were fired in his direction, which caused Nero with transmutation to create a defensive wall against those balls, while Yu intercepted those on his side with wind magic. Nero. Well, it seems that the controller doesn't want us in the place. You, can you find it? He asked, looking at the girl who didn't say anything. You, did you find it? Nero asked without receiving an answer. You. He said, very confused when he saw that she didn't respond, so he approached her, and before he touched her she raised his hand, throwing a wave of scene against her, being that he quickly dodged the attack of the girl who hit the wall of the place, destroying a large part of it. Hey you, why do you attack me? Nero asked, very confused because of the sudden attack, but he understood it when he noticed that there was a beautiful crimson rose in his head. And he mind. So it was because of those green balls. Those balls must spread some kind of neurotoxin that allows you to control those you infect. That rose looks very good on you. Wait. It's not time to think about that. While dodging the girl's continuous attacks. You, Nero? She said with great pain in her voice as she became the puppet, although it hurt her more that she's being used to attack Nero. Nero, seeing how Yu frowns being a victim of the monster, caused a huge fury in Nero, not wanting to see his new friend and companion so sad, so quickly unstood Donner and Schlag and pointed at the rose on her head. However, when he was about to shoot, Nero noticed how Yu's body moved in order to protect the flower on her head. So he gave up that idea but thought about jumping, and when he tensed his muscles to jump, he saw how Yu was pointing to her head with her own magic. Nero. I see double hostage, he said, knowing that the one who controlled Yu planned to use her as hostage since it had a way of responding to Nero, but what it did not know was the ability of Devilbringer that would leave her without plays. Since from one moment to the next a monster that controlled Yu came out of one of the holes of the place where they were. This was something similar to a Lamia being more natural, being the body of a woman fission with a plant. Nero, when he saw her, pointed it with Donner and Schlag in its direction, but Yu's body moved, crossing Nero's aim. Yu. Nero, I'm sorry, she said while biting her lip when she felt a complete hindrance for Nero having been captured in that way, while the monster seemed to enjoy the scene. Nero. I'm fed up, he said, tired of the creature's teasing, so Nero keep Donner and Schlag, being that the creature thought that he was surrendering when the arm of the Devilbringer glow. The creature saw the light, it didn't understand what was happening. The light was so bright that it didn't notice the spectral arm that cut the flower, and you fell to the ground without force, which surprised the monster, but when it looked for the person responsible it never found Nero, but what it did find was that its body had begun to catch fire. Nero. Suffers bastard, that was for making you suffer, he said, picking up its burning body, taking out Rebelon to start cutting it into pieces, while the rose from Yu's head withered, implying that the creature is dead. Nero. Yu, are you okay? He said, arriving at the girl's place. Yu. I'm good. She said without much desire, since she felt a burden for Nero, which he noticed, so he caressed the girl's head while smiling kindly. Nero. You're not a hindrance, after all neither of us knew how this monster controlled the others. Yu. But she said, not feeling very sure that she deserved Nero's kind words. Nero. I already told you, you really helped me a lot, and I'm happy that you're with me, it was just an accident, so don't blame yourself for this, okay? Yu. Okay. She said as she smiled and let herself be carried away by Nero's little darling in his head. Nero. Well, now we will be able to go through this floor without problems. He said, getting up, since you must have felt how she regained her strength. Yu. Nero, she said, drawing the boy's attention. If I had told you that you could shoot, would you have done it? Yu asked very curiously, waiting for him to tell her something like that he would never shoot her, or that he would protect her from anything before something like that happened. Nero. If it had been someone else, I would have done it without hesitation, but it was about you, of course I wouldn't have done it. Well, not just her but everyone who important for him. Yu. What if there hadn't been another option? Nero. If there was no other, I would have created it where you wouldn't get hurt, he said, being that Yu was greatly surprised, since Nero, no matter the circumstances in which he could be, he would not let anyone hurt her, just because it was her he would do the impossible to save her. Those ideas made the girl's smile widen enormously. At the same time her cheeks became a beautiful pink that contrasted with her beautiful skin. Are you okay? He said when he saw how she smiled. Yu. It's nothing, let's go. She said very cheerfully, going where he was taking him by the arm, which makes him happy since for some reason he liked to see her happy. A few days later. After what happened with the controlling monster, they collected the remains of this one that fortunately were not burned, and continuing with their advance, where Nero had finally confirmed that they had gone down the 200 floors of the dungeon, being that the two were checking their supplies on the 199th floor. He as an expert half knew that in every RPG on the top floor, there would be a test of final boss. For that same reason, decided to finish what he was planning, the creation of a new weapon so strong enough to fight against anything, being that when they arrived at the place he got to work being mostly created with the skin of the scorpion, since this turned out to be a very useful mineral. Mineral Stall. High magical affinity. This mineral can increase its hardness by the amount of magical power used. Thanks to that, Nero was able to mold the shape he wanted, and in that way he gave life to his new creation, starting his assembly. Yu. Nero, have you finished yet? She said when she saw how he began to assemble something. Nero. Almost, I just have to assemble it. He said with a smile, as if he were a little boy looking at his new toy. Yu. What kind of weapon is it? Nero. It's known as a sniper rifle, but the one I am making would be an antimatter rifle, rail rifle version. If you compare it with Donner and Schlag, this is even more powerful version, since its bullets are also made very specially, he explained, while continuing its assembly, since Nero really wanted to finish it, and when he finished Nero could only admire its creation being a work of art in his eyes. Yu. Is this weapon more powerful than Donner and Schlag? She said, very curious about the weapon. Nero. If it is in theory, its power is many times greater than Donner and Schlag, since the bullets are made of tear mineral coated with Stahl mineral, and although it can only fire one bullet at a time, it has a huge attack power. Nero, thanks to continuously transmuting his bullets, acquired the sub-ability transmutation of replicas that allowed him to manufacture the bullets in mass, while on Yu's side, she only enjoyed seeing how it transmuted. Nero. Hey Yu, you didn't finish telling me about the traitors. Why did they create the dungeons, and who were these? Yu. They were followers of Sparta who betrayed the demons and sided with the humans and protected humanity, and fought against demons in ancient times, and said that they built the dungeons to destroy the underworld. She said without much emotion. Nero. Sparta. Where have I heard that story before? Well, what happened to them? He asked, wanting to satisfy his curiosity. Yu. Their plan was discovered by the demon Lord Mundus, leading to them to fled to the ends of the world, and where they arrived, they became the current 9 great dungeons. One of them is this dungeon known as the Labyrinth of Sparta, she said, but Nero was left with more questions like who's Sparta? Why did he sided with the human? And more. Nero. So they were discovered and ended up exiled in these dungeons. That means that if there is an exit on the 200th floor. He said as he looked at the door that directed him to his last opponents. Yu. It is likely, after all, it was said that the traitors lived in the depths of the abyss, so it is possible that there is a way out. Nero. But for that we may have to fight to the death with whatever is behind that door. You. She said with her characteristic nod. Nero did not have the slightest idea of how long she had been in the dungeon or how much time he had spent with you, although what he did know is that he had changed a lot throughout his trip together. Before he enjoyed killing the monsters and trained so much that he considered it a necessity, even if Nero did not take anything from them. But when he got Yu's company, she had become a great support for him, being so much so that she managed to get him back to normal and correct his ideals on protecting those he wishes to protect. Nero, in the time he lived with her, began to see her as a woman, and Nero had to admit it, a part of him wanted to be with her, being that he began to develop a certain feeling for her by wanting to protect her as much as his lover and girls that he has feelings for, and in Yu's case, it was something extremely similar, since when she finished taking his blood, she was only on her lap waiting for him to finish eating. Nero, you, is something wrong? He said, feeling that she was a little strange as usual. You. She nodded next to his moan of affirmation. Nero. What's going on? He said, hoping to know what she had. You. Tomorrow may be the final battle, right? She said with a choppy and a little trembling tone. Nero. If tomorrow will be our final battle, does something happen? He said, wanting to know where she wanted to go. You. If the monster could be much stronger than any other we've met before, and maybe you, I can't end up imagining the image of Nero dead. Nero. I see, that's what worries you. Don't worry, we'll be fine. He said while caressing the girl's head. You and I are very strong, and I also have this arm. Also, don't forget my new weapon, everything will be fine. He said with great confidence. You. She said, a little crestfallen when she thought it wouldn't be enough. Nero. Hey, leave that face. If you think we'll lose, that's how it will be. You have to believe that we'll be winners. You and I'll get out of here, that's what I promised you, and take you to my home, right? You. Yes. She said, since she trusted him and that promise. Nero. Well, we will leave this place together, and we will always be together, he said with a friendly smile, and you blushed a lot from those words. Well, the best thing will be that we rest, the campfire is about to go out, we have to sleep, he said while lying on the stone of the shelter, and you was on top of him, even though she wanted to take one more step, so she approached Nero's face, being that he watched her perform this action, being this how he extended his little lips towards this one who looked at him with a smile, since he would not refuse if that was what she wanted so well. The bonfire that illuminated the shelter went out, they put their lips together, corresponding to the love that was born in that dark and gloomy dungeon. Nero mind. Ah shit, Sakura going to kill me. The next day. After an extremely quiet night where the two slept together and hugged, however, that was not the important thing since they prepared leaving the shelter. Well, Nero corroborated that he had everything ready for any type of situation on his back. He had his new weapon Spiral. In the case of Yu, she carried a bag full of grenades and ammunition for Donner and Schlag, while Nero also had a bag with the same content, while he had the Devil Bringer ready in case of emergency. They were in front of the door, where when they opened it, they found a huge room Nero calculated at least 30 meters, where the most striking were some pillars that reached the ceiling, which should not matter, but if it mattered when both began to enter, so the columns shone weakly, so both were on guard since anything that could happen. Although what happened was that the pillars were illuminated consecutively one after the other until they reached the end of the room. For a second they both expected some kind of attack or trap, being that both relied on their abilities to detect anything that the two felt it almost instantly. In front of them the boss had appeared, was huge, average 30 meters long. 6 long and threatening heads that did not stop showing their sharp fangs. For Nero that was known as a Hydra. Hydra. Kuruan. The Hydra roared before the invaders of his rooms, but more to Nero, since he felt enormously threatened for some strange reason, and that's why he threw a strong thirst for blood that did not even mute Nero. Suddenly one of the heads that had a red Hydra opened his mouth, and from this a huge flare was thrown, being that this was going straight to the two, so Nero dodged, jumping to his left, while Yu to his right, dodging the attack that was the first attack, made so with a quick movement. Nero drew Donner and Schlag, and shot without any doubt towards the red head, being that he could not stand exploding due to the powerful impact. Nero mind. This is very strange. I know that Donner is strong, but that he has destroyed it with a shoddy thought, since other monsters gave him more fight. Nero. Yu ends his head immediately. He screamed, hoping to quickly defeat the Hydra. Yu. Okay. Scarlet Spear, she said, quickly casting her spell. However, before this attack arrived, another of the heads got in the way, being this one with a yellow Hydra, who received the attack without showing resistance. But Nero noticed how a white Hydra head roared, and a light enveloped the two destroyed heads, and they recovered quickly. Nero mind. I understand the red crest rose fire, the yellow one is responsible for the protection of the others, and the most important is the white one that heals the destroyed ones, he thought while looking at the other three, not knowing what the others were doing. We must end the white Hydra with a single shot, even if the yellow one crosses our path. Nero lifted his devil bringer as it glowed brightly as he showed a smile with a spirit. The bright light was bright, for the Hydra didn't know what was happening, so it only disliked it. While the devil bringer glowing some increases demonic energy, Nero began an attack by throwing 2 grenades, one that blinded the Hydra and another that burned the Hydra, who could not help but release a roar of pain. Nero telepathy. If you have the opportunity, destroy the white-crested head so that the others do not regenerate. Although Devil Bringer is carrying increases demonic energy, it is better if we use it as a last resort. He told her using his ability as you created her spell Scarlet Spear by throwing it against the white Hydra. Well, for his part the yellow Hydra could not even react, being that Yu's attack destroyed the white Hydra without problems or inconveniences. The Devil Bringer was burning bright, making Nero happy that that problematic head had fallen without many problems. Nero telepathy. Good work you, now let's take care of the other heads, but remember to be cautious with the other 3 that one has not attacked. Yue telepathy. Understood. She said, understanding his concern. When the Hydra recovered all its senses, it noticed how the white Hydra head had fallen, so its movements had become more aggressive. The head of the blue Hydra created huge ice stones in the direction where Nero was, while the green Hydra threw wind waves that became furious knives equally aimed at Nero, so he used his ability flash step dodging and shooting towards the Hydra that began to dodge the bullets when understanding that he could not regenerate anymore. Yu was in a similar situation, being locked by the head of the red Hydra, who threw huge balls of fire, so Yu hid behind one of the pillars of the room so as not to waste magic by blocking the attacks of the Hydra, but Yu took advantage of a moment where the red Hydra head stopped attacking by throwing her Scarlet Spear at the blue Hydra head, that because it was attacking Nero, who could not avoid the attack being completely destroyed. Meanwhile, the head of the yellow Hydra, when he saw this, threw himself against the pillar where Yu was hiding, destroying it, while Yu lost her shelter, immediately ran since the red Hydra continued its attacks. While from her bag she took out 2 grenades that she threw against the red Hydra, who dodged and closed his eyes, thinking that these would blind it again, but that was its mistake, since when both exploded releasing ultrasonic waves that stunned it, and when it recovered, he opened his mouth to continue his attack. However, for some strange reason he could not do anything, since the other grenade was a paralyzer. Yu. I got you, she said victorious, so she created a wind spell that threw the same wind blades as the green Hydra, perfectly cutting the head of the red Hydra, and when she saw her achievement she looked at Nero, who was still looking at one of the last 2 heads, in addition to noticing how the green Hydra head was about to attack him, so Yu without losing a second prepared to cast a spell without noticing that the yellow Hydra head was right behind her, and when Yu felt it she could see how it was already throwing itself against her, but this never arrived when a loud sound was heard. Bang. In a single second the head exploded with a single shot, causing Yu to look where Nero, who had also taken care of the other green Hydra head and in his only hand, held his new weapon Spiral. Nero stared at the only head left. This one is a black Hydra being destroyed in a second by an accurate and deadly shot from Spiral. Yu looked completely impressed at the ease with which Nero had finished, with the last head being that she noticed when Nero approached her with a smile, and this jumped to him, receiving him in a hug while they shared a beautiful smile. Yu. We won. She said very happily. Nero. See, I told you that he didn't finish when he felt something strange. Yu. Nero. She said, very confused by the sudden stop, but what surprised her the most was when Nero pushed her away from him, and as she was pushed in a rush to look for an answer on Nero's sudden action, but instantly understood why he had done that. Where before the two were together, now you could only see Nero with large wounds, and his body expelled smoke while he collapsed. Yu. Nero, she screamed, very worried. Moments before. Nero. See, I told you that he didn't finish when his perception had detected something. His Devil Bringer began to blink rapidly in a sign of warning, but Nero could only see it for a moment of the lifeless body of the Hydra. One more head had come out, being that this one is a silver Hydra that quickly opened its mouth. Yu. Nero. She said, very confused by her sudden pause. Well, Nero knew that he did not have time, so she pushed Yu quite hard, and only a few seconds later he received a powerful halo of pure power, and when this stopped his body was extremely hurt, being that he fell to the floor not being able to stand up. Nero's body hurt a lot. He was a few seconds away from losing consciousness, but he did not give up. He still had to fight. He knew that Yu could not against that thing because of its enormous magical expense that it surely had during the battle, so he very carefully began to get up. Nero. There's no way, I will not allow that thing hurt her, he said, getting up with rebellion that was holding him up, as he had managed to survive thanks to his great physical and magical endurance, in addition to his ability Diamond Skin. Although it had a cost, his right eye was destroyed, his body was in a serious state. Luckily he had not lost anything else, although that annoyed the Silver Hydra, who opened his mouth again ready to throw his final attack, or that was what he thought. But before it could attack, Nero saw how several grenades were thrown towards the Silver Hydra head. These exploded, releasing light, ultrasonic waves and tar, which burned to the head. He immediately knew that the one who had attacked was you. She ran towards him and helped him get up. Before the head recovered, they both hid behind a pillar. You. Nero, drink the ambrosia quickly. She gave him some containers of ambrosia to drink. He did it, but he realized that his body was not healing as fast as before. You. What's going on? Why aren't they working? She was confused. Why wasn't it working, and why isn't his regeneration work as well? Nero. He was breathing painfully. Calm down, you. Most likely that Aurora had some effect that it is interrupting healing. You. An effect? Nero. Yeah, in League it was said that the Hydra had a powerful poison that was capable of killing any creature. If this applies to this Hydra, then the poison and the ambrosia and my regeneration are struggling. That's why I don't heal. He began to vomit blood. His condition was very serious. You made him drink more ambrosia, but the result was the same. She knew that soon the Silver Hydra head would recover. She had to do something. You. I'm going to buy time, she said. Get up. Nero. Wait. Don't do it, you. That thing is dangerous. He yelled out. Try to grab her hand to force her not to go. You. If I don't do something, it will soon recover and destroy this pillar. I will gain enough time for you to recover, and then we will beat it together. She said, avoiding Nero grab and stare at him. Nero. You. He didn't know what to do, but his Devilbringer continued to glow. You. This time, I will protect you. She took Schlag and left where the Hydra was. Nero felt helpless. It was that same feeling he felt, being useless, worthless, powerless, and finally deadweight. You wouldn't last long in that state. He tried to get up, but he couldn't. His body didn't respond to him, and little by little his vision became more blurred. With you. When she came out of the pillar, she could see how the Silver Hydra head looked at her menacingly. Since Yu had a low reserve of magic, she decided that instead of attacking with magic, it would be better to strengthen her body with magic. Just at that moment, the Silver Hydra head began to throw the same aurora, but now like bullets of light. Yu started running to dodge the attacks while pulling out some grenades and throwing them. The head of Silver Hydra avoided this. These released the ultrasonic waves. Yu took the opportunity and, using an electric spell, to shoot. The bullet hit the ridge of the Silver Hydra head, but… Yu. Schlag shot was supposed to cause some damage, but instead the head was intact. The Silver Hydra head took advantage of Yu's bewilderment and threw a bombardment at her. Yu, I dodged it quickly. However, one of the light bullets hit her in the shoulder. She groaned in pain but endured it and kept running to dodge the other light bullets. Her automatic regeneration began to cure it, but now it was slower than usual. She understood that the poison also delayed her ability, just like Nero. In addition, if she continued to be beaten, her little magic she was using to strengthen her body would run out. She tried to gain more time with some grenades, but when she looked in her bag, there were no more. The Silver Hydra head continued to bomb it. It fired again, but the result was the same as the previous one. The head began to get tired of chasing Yu, and little by little he began to corner her in a corner. Schlag attacks were ineffective, and she no longer had grenades. Despair was consuming Yu. Seeing that she was being cornered, she tried to escape, but a bullet of light hurt her leg. She fell on her knees in pain. The Silver Hydra head took advantage of this and launched a bombardment at her. Yu saw how the light bullets approached her. She tried to stop, but she couldn't because of her wound. The moment the light bullets were going to hit her, she felt that something was holding her and quickly took her away from the place. She looked up and saw that the one who was holding her was Nero. Nero. I'm sorry for taking so long, Yu, he said, looking at her. Yu. Nero. She was surprised to see him. But Nero a few minutes ago. He was lying against a pillar without being able to get up. Yu's battle against the last head had begun. However, despite all the time that had passed, the ambrosia and his regeneration had not yet finished healing him, and his vision became increasingly blurred. Nero. Damn, I have to help you. Although his attempts to get up were useless, he didn't give up and kept trying. However, his consciousness gradually began to fade. Nero subconscious. He was laying on the dirt of the wasteland. His eyes were closed. He couldn't feel anything. He didn't hear anything. When he realized this, a single thought ran through his mind: I've died. Nothing had changed. Just like the another time he met someone important, he couldn't save her, and she died. Now the same thing was about to happen. In both cases, it was because he lacked power. Now you would die soon, and it would be his fault. This filled him with anger, and he clenched his Devilbringer fist tightly. Nero. It's all my fault. You know that's not true. That voice was nostalgic for him. When he heard it, he opened his eye quickly, and there stood his another self right in front of him with bright brown hair and yellow glowing eyes. Nero. You or me, what are you doing here? Issei. Of course, don't you remember I'm still behind you? Nero. But I thought you disappeared. I thought you left when I walked past you. Issei. Did you forget what you said, idiot? Nero. What I said. All of a sudden a flash of black appear. Flashback. Can you keep up with me? My ass. Right back at you. You're the one who's gotta keep up with me. Flashback end. Nero. It's true I said that. Even if I lost everything I still walk forward. Issei. That's right. Since that day the light has been following after you, guided and pushing you forward, and since you forgot the words of that you said, you thought me for dead. And now that I can finally contact you again, what do I find? I have to save your ass from a weaker Trihexa attempt on try to killing you. And to top it off, as a good prince a girl has to defend you. Where is your pride as a man or a dragon? Faced with those words, the old Issei would have started arguing with him, or he wouldn't have said anything. However, the current Issei, who is known as Nero, was different. He knew that he had no time to lose if he wanted to save you, so he contained his irritation and his desire to want to hit his partner and breathe calmly. Issei. Also Nero raised his hand to tell his other self to stop. This one noticed the seriousness and stopped talking. Nero. There is no time for explanations or discussions. The most important person for me is risking her life right now, so I needed to know 3 things. First, what is your name? Issei. Alright, my name is Light Issei, the one that is walk forward for a brighter future and is part of the light magic you're using. Nero. My next question is who that guy? He pointed off the distance where there another person who is currently sit on a single spot being surrounded by shadows and being filled with darkness. Light Issei. Are you talking about him? He pointed at the person involved in darkness. Well, if I had to say, he would be my alternate self, so you could name him Dark Issei. He represents the past and despair and pain for everything to go back to normal. He's the manifestation of your darkness powers. Nero. I see, so there's a part of me that wants everything to just be a lie and picture of the world he wants it where everything was happy while suffering in the outside. Light Issei. Yeah, he hasn't moved from that spot in a long time, even when you told us to keep up with you, he's not moving, but without both of them, knowing that Dark Issei started to look around and spotted Nero, and he started to get up and start walking slowly one day in my reach and cover Nero in darkness. Nero. I guess my last question is, are you going to help me? Light Issei. Of course I'm not gonna let you be protected by a girl, besides, you're the one that's supposed to protect them, that's who we always are. Nero. Then I guess I know what I have to say, he said before looking at his Devilbringer and began to shout, I need more power. The whole place began to be distorted at the same time that it began to shine. At that moment, Nero woke up and ignoring the pain of his body, he got up. The Devilbringer that covered his right arm. It was at that moment that he realized Yu's dangerous situation, so without wasting a second, he ran to where she was without realizing a new skill was born, Riftwalk, the final derivative of the air dance skill. Allows the user to move at extreme high speed and increases the ability of all the 5 senses to the maximum to allow better focus and process all information easily while in extreme high speed mode. But Nero currently. The silver Hydra head stared at Nero. He looked back at it while holding Yu. Nero. I'm sorry for taking so long, Yu. Issei. He lowered it and stepped forward without ever taking his eyes off the last head of the Hydra. Nero. Are you okay? Yu. Yes. Nero. He shows a smile. Thank you for protecting me, Yu. Now I'll take care of it. Yu. Nero, your Devilbringer. Nero. It's my partner, the best on there is better than a so-called red dragon. The Hydra was staring at Nero. It had noticed the change in Nero and remained alert. As the Devilbringer go even brighter, but then it started to calm down as a bluest aura was around Nero. The aura alone frightened the Hydra. It was the first time it felt fear. He could sense this challenger is a demon in word, but it could not back down, as the beast showed what seemed to be a grin, knew it was going to die, but knew that this will be its master. Nero. Disappeared from Yu. She was surprised, but then she noticed Nero had jumped and was preparing something while in the air and showing the Devilbringer in a bright light of blue. I'm sorry, but this is over for you. He said, quite weak but determined as lightning was around his body. He was using Lightning Field, as well as Lightning Dragon Slayer, Magic Risoku Shunm is an original spell created by Nero that make Nero move in the speed of lightning, which is relatively 150 km per second, about 93 miles per second. Lighting Devil Smasher. It was heard, and a powerful blue ray was launched as he moved in that high speed. Nero used Riftwalk so everything moved slowly as he connects his fist towards the head of the Hydra as the room began to tremble from the impact while it revealed a dead and smashed head of the Hydra while Nero collapsed again while his Devilbringer light faded and he saw how he had achieved it but immediately began to vomit a large amount of blood. Yu. Nero, she screamed, extremely worried about the Nero's condition. A magic like that would very much killed a person. As for Nero had lost consciousness when he felt how Yu was safe. That's it, guys. Thanks for watching and supporting us. See you in the next part.